In the late 90s, it was decided that the Red Meat Marketing and R&D Authority, Australian Meat and Livestock Council, was not performing to the required standard, and the Agricultural Minister at the time, John Anderson, decided to restructure the whole R&D and marketing system of the red meat industry. This resulted in the merger of 9 signatories, which included processors, lot feeders, live shippers, exporters, Commonwealth representatives and producers, to name a few. Meat and Livestock Australia was created. Under this new structure, processors and live shippers were allowed to form their own service company for R&D and marketing, and have full control over their levies. This contrasts sharply with producers. Cattle Council was given the task of looking after producers' advocacy needs. However, several issues came to light. Under the MOU, MLA is required to consult with Cattle Council of Australia on MLA's expenditure. However, CCA has no ability to instruct or oversee them. In contrast, the live shippers and processors have well-resourced peak councils and a complete oversight of any funding going to the MLA. In order to remain financially viable, CCA sought service work from the MLA. This work has never been tendered and severely compromises any oversight of MLA. CCA is owned by the state farming organisations that pay a fee to sit on the CCA board. But due to declining membership and financial problems, they are now reluctant to pay for seats. This diagram clearly shows the complexity of the Red Meat MOU and clearly shows producers' funds going into the MLA without any form of oversight by their peak council. Under the present structure, MLA and processors have joint ownership of AusMeat, who control trade standards, meat language, and rules and regulations governing the processing of stock and how much trim is taken. At the processors, a beast remains the property of the producer until the carcass reaches the scales, although the hide and byproducts are harvested prior to the scales, with these remaining the property of the processor. Over the years, we have seen much conjecture about how much trim is taken prior to scales, and it is almost impossible to bring any evidence of excess trim, even though AusMeat do regular audits. The ABA has written to AusMeat suggesting that processors could be obliged to send footage of the slaughter process back to AusMeat, which would ensure unannounced surveillance. Naturally, the request was politely rejected. The MLA has its own integrity company at a cost of $17 million, which forces producers to jump through all sorts of hurdles, whilst the processors don't have to jump through the same levels, and do not contribute towards the integrity company's upkeep. MLA talk about traceability from gate to plate. However, when a carcass is boned and boxed, there is no obligation for all parts of the industry chain to ensure the codes on boxes are recorded, to ensure full traceability from gate to plate. The business plan for MSA was drawn up in the late 90s, with the suggestion that the new system would stop the slide in beef consumption. This simply hasn't happened. With the consumption of beef dropping from 40 kilograms in 1998 to 20 kilograms per person in 2021. In 2019, MLA's Managing Director, Jason Strong, suggested the consumption of beef had risen to 27 kilos. This was in complete contrast to ABARES figures, and when questioned, MLA stated that it employed a private consultant to calculate the consumption. Originally, MSA was a great initiative. However, by 2004, MSA was on the point of collapse, as the processors and supermarkets would not adopt the system. It was a victim of its own tight specifications. A relaxation of MSA requirements saw MLA graders replaced by company graders, along with the guarantees of DNA testing gone, all star ratings removed, acceptance of cows that had calved, and the list goes on. By 2020, approximately 3.8 million cattle were graded, which represented 45% of the total adult cattle slaughtered. This was far greater than the 30% that the original business plan suggested. One can only wonder what these figures would have been if the watered-down process had not taken place. Since 1998, chicken and pork has taken over as the most consumed meat in Australia. MLA is very proud of the fact that the price of retail beef is at record levels and are quick to claim marketing success. However, it is common practice to harvest primal cuts from aged cows, and I would suggest that the two things that drive consumption of any product is price and consistency. MLA has had at least 8 inquiries since 1998. In 2014, a Senate committee travelled the width and breadth of Australia and came up with 7 recommendations which were totally ignored. One imagines there would be enormous pressure brought on the government by some signatories of the MOU, who pay very little towards marketing and R&D, and yet get so much in return. The AWI and MLA have some interesting comparisons. Wool producers pay a statutory levy through their brokers, with names and amounts recorded by the levies collection unit, and this information is passed on to the AWI, and levy payers receive their votes directly from the AWI. Cattle producers have levies collected by agents and processors, and then this is passed on to the levy collections unit. However, payees' names and amounts are not recorded. In the case of the MLA, nobody has any idea of how many votes the chairman cast at the last AGM. And despite continued requests, the MLA refused to divulge that information or what percentage of the votes were cast. The AWI have a selection panel that selects candidates to be voted on by producers. Usually 7 candidates selected for 3 positions. The MLA have a selection panel that selects 1 person for every position, so there is only 1 candidate for 1 position. Hardly a democratic vote. In 2018, the Minister ordered a review of AWI to be conducted by Ernst Young, which resulted in 82 recommendations. One wonders why the Minister was so keen to get 82 recommendations on AWI, whilst the 7 recommendations made by the Senate into the MLA were totally ignored. When one compares the MLA and the AWI, the processors completely dominate the MLA without contributing towards the upkeep of the MLA, and one can only wonder how much political influence processors are capable of bringing to bear. Some years ago, one Cattle Council chairman stated no change is not an option, and one former minister said, "Change must occur and we will not let you down." With all the evidence, surely the time has come for a root and branch inquiry by a major accountancy firm, and finally the instigation of the 7 Senate recommendations.